All right, who's ready? Time for a little boa bloviation. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to bloviate a little bit. So, I wanted to go over a few things that I think are important that you need to consider when you think about what direction you want to go and what you want to do breeding boa wise. You know, what kind of animals you should work with, how you should approach it, the steps you should take along the way. Some of them are obvious, some of them are things you maybe haven't thought of. This is from my perspective, and of course, my opinion. That's why it's bloviating. So, the number one thing to think about, I think, is you need to obtain animals you like. So it goes without saying, right? So I often get asked, what should I invest in? What do you think would be a good boa investment? Well, number one, you're far more likely to be successful breeding something you really like. So if you obtain an animal and it's strictly as an investment, it's not something you're fascinated with, not a project you're going to be thrilled to work with yourself, you're probably not going to give it the due diligence that really would maximize your potential or your likelihood for success. So, number one, pick a project that you like. Number two, and people don't think about this sometimes, but you need to have housing that's suitable for boa breeding success. So that involves a cage large enough for the female in particular, but the male as well, to be able to thermal regulate properly after ovulation so that she can warm herself up as warm as she needs to be able to gestate those babies properly, and then move away from that warmer area to keep herself still adequately warm so that the babies are still able to develop properly. But it's a very important aspect as far as keeping animals. Generally speaking, a larger warm area as opposed to a long narrow strip of flex watt. I don't think there's many of the rack manufacturers that do that anymore. Originally, you'd have a rack with these big tubs, that you have to open and, cause an earthquake to get a good look to see what's going on, unlike a cage where you just walk in, peer in the window and see what's going on. These large tubs would have a strip of 4-inch flex watt or even 3-inch flex watt that ran left to right the 4-foot way, which gave them a really long, narrow hot spot, more like a hot strip, which is definitely not the best way to go. So I don't think anybody does that anymore. They pretty much are putting in a panel. The panel, in my opinion, should be large enough that the female in the cage can coil up and be entirely on the heat. So if your heater is only this wide, you're going to have to use a female that is relatively small in that cage. So my cages that I built for myself all have a heater that's at least 18 inches wide. So that's pretty much any female is going to be adequately parked on an 18-inch wide heat strip. So mine are 18 inches and they go from front to back in the cage. So they're going to be about 22 inches deep on a 4-foot by 2-foot cage. So I don't run it all the way out the front, but out to the front. And then on these shelf cages, these are 4-foot by 30 inches deep and 18 inches high, a foot and a half high with a shelf. And in that case, they've got a heater that's 18 inches, or some of them 22 inches, and that runs from front to back, so it's like 28 inches wide. Now, interestingly enough, most of the time, the gravid female favors sitting on the shelf, where there isn't a direct heat source. They're not sitting on the heat. But the way I've set up my cages, the heat on this stack, for instance, the heat is on this side of all these cages, going all the way up. So a female in this cage, when this female ovulates, she will probably spend most of her time on the shelf right there, which is above the heat, which is under the cage, outside the cage, down here. But this cage up here has a heater on the bottom as well. And the top cage, I actually put a heater on the top of the cage. So the female, when she's parked on the shelf, there's heat radiating down from the cage above. Interesting, huh? So that's one thing that's unique and really powerful for my cages and the way they're set up. So number one, go with a project that you're interested in. Number two, set up proper heating, or have a cage with proper heating to facilitate a successful breeding. Number three, this is a don't do suggestion. Don't buy a banger male unless you've got a female worthy of that banger male's genetics. So in other words, don't buy a IMG, Labyrinth, Key West, Aztec VPI unless you've got a suitable mate to breed that to make yourself visuals and not just hets. So it'd be really cool to have that animal. There's only one on the planet. He's in a cage right through there on the other side of this aisle. But that'd be a cool animal to have. But if you don't have him with another VPI and you have him with something else, all you're going to make are hets. You'll make some cool hets, but those hets are going to be a lot harder to sell than if you make visuals. Follow me? And if you buy a banger male and he happens to be het for whatever, it's part of the whole package, and you don't breed him to something to prove that het out, let's presume that he actually is het. If you don't breed him to a visual, ideally a visual, you're just going to make pos hets. Well, who wants pos hets? Nobody wants to buy an animal that's a pos het for a desirable trait. People want to buy visuals or known hets. And that, for those of you who don't understand what het means, that's 100% het. So 100% hets are not 100% possible hets. They're het, meaning one of the two parents was a visual of a simple recessive, thereby meaning every single baby in the litter is a het. Not 100% het. It's a het. Now, you can call it 100% het if you want to. It's one of my old school pet peeves. I don't know where 100% het came from, but it was understood for 15 years, probably, first 15 years of making hets. In the reptile world, everybody knew what het meant. It didn't mean 100% het. It meant het because one parent was a visual for that simple recessive. So my number three suggestion is don't buy a banger male unless you already have a great female to breed him to. So another female, preferably that's visual for everything that male has. So you make a mistake. A lot of people do this. I've seen it done over and over and over. They buy all these banger males. Oh, wow, this thing is so cool. It's got all these genes, and they've got 3 or 4 really cool males, and what they end up doing is they get garbage, I would call garbage, females to breed them with just to make a whole bunch of hets. And not animals that are particularly good examples of what could be made. So they'll get a het, or they'll get a male that's a really important male, so a valuable male with a lot of genetics. Say he's anarthristic, whatever, anarthristic labyrinth or whatever. So if you have an anarthristic labyrinth, what are you going to breed it with? You're going to breed it with an anarthristic or a ghost, right? I mean, that's your best choice rather than making hets. So invariably, seems like 3 out of 4 times, people just look for the biggest stinking ghost or anarthristic they can find. And then they make much poorer quality visuals than they would make if they looked for a really good quality ghost or really light, beautiful, clean anarthristic. They'll make more of them, but the quality will be diminished. And depending on what you're doing, I'm making babies first for me. And I want the best quality babies possible. So I'm not breeding a really good quality male to a crappy female. In fact, I've had good quality males that I didn't even put in with a female because I did not have a female worthy of that male's genetics many times. So it's not simply, for me, it's not simply about making babies. It's about making good quality babies. Babies that I'm proud to be able to keep the best ones for myself. I don't have to keep the best ones for myself. And I've done this many times. I've produced a litter. I'll just give an example. So a few years ago, I produced a litter of hypo, labyrinths, het carbon, pos het, VPI. And I kept the last babies that I didn't sell from that litter. Because I know, even though some of the ones that were picked ahead of mine were nicer, I know I still have really good quality stuff to breed them to. And I'm going to make great quality babies. I don't have to have the very best of the best from what I produce. I can still sell the best of the best. And those guys that got them know that they got better ones than the ones I kept because they came and picked them out. Well, one guy came and picked them out in particular. And so he got great quality animals, very happy with them. And I got the ones that weren't quite as nice, which were still beautiful. And I'll make great babies with them as well because I've got really good quality stuff to breed them with. Follow me? But so sort of depending on kind of animals you collect for your projects, you're going to control the quality of the offspring that you produce. So I know a lot of people, it's going to go in one ear and right out the other. Oh, I want to make a whole bunch of them. And you will. You'll make a whole bunch of whatever instead of making the best quality possible. Now, here's number 4. You need more. Ultimately, this may sound a little bit contradictory, but you need more males than females. Always. So let me explain. So I know. Some of you have bred every single female you've ever tried. You've never failed. You've never produced a slug. Everything has always worked out. You're a superstar and rent a car. Well, I'm not. I've probably had more slugs than anyone. Truth be told, probably. But I've probably produced more babies than anyone, too. Just by virtue of the fact that I've been doing it for a long time. 40 years. This is my 40th year. And I've produced thousands of litters. So it just adds up. So based upon my experience and based upon thousands of litters, I'm going to give you some basic stats and explain why you need more males than females and why you need more than just one pair for a project if you want to be successful. All right, you with me so far? I don't really expect an answer. This isn't live. So overall, my success rate is approximately 2 out of 3 females that I attempt to breed will ovulate. All right? That's pretty good. I know it's not 100% like you. You get them every single time. You haven't missed a female yet, but I've missed a lot of females every year. I missed dozens of females. So I expect that about 2 out of 3 females that I attempt to breed will breed. So if I attempted to breed 100 females this year, which I'm not, but if I attempted to breed 100 females this year, I would expect about 65 of them would ovulate. So 2 years ago, I'll tell you. So about 2 years ago, I tried to breed about 90 females. That's the most I've ever tried. I'll probably try close to that this year. And I had 80 or 81 ovulations. Well, that was a banner year. So that was much higher than usual. So, and the larger the number of animals you're breeding, the more likely you are to see ovulations, of course. So with females, about 2 out of 3 will ovulate if you try to breed them at the right time of year. If you try too late, your number is going to be lower. So last year I tried about a month and a half later than I should have, and I got way less than 2 out of 3. I probably only had 35% of the females I tried to breed last year ovulate. It was not good. But it was my fault because I didn't put males in until about 6 weeks later than I should, because I was trying to get a bunch of males with a little bit more size on them than they had. Now, male-wise, you're probably only going to get about 50%, 45 to 50% of them will successfully cause a female to ovulate. Well, how is that possible? If you're trying to breed 100 females and you get 65, two-thirds, or 66 to ovulate, how is it possible that the males you're only going to get 45 or 50%? Well, because if you're smart, you're going to have more than an equal number of males and females. And you're going to find out very quickly, early on in the breeding process, you're going to find out that some of those males just don't want to breed. So if I was trying to breed 100 females, a little more than I will try, then I know I would need to use about 120 males to accomplish what I would normally anticipate happening with those females. I would have to have more males available. So that means I can't, unless I cannot obtain them, I cannot have only one pair of a particular project that I'm trying to make. You follow me? So sometimes I only have one pair. Sometimes I only have one animal. Like when I bred the first Nexus, the first VPI Nexus, I only had her. She was the only VPI Nexus that I had. And I didn't have another Nexus to breed with her. Not that I would breed Nexus to Nexus anyways. There's no real benefit to doing that breeding. Especially now, it would require a certain amount of inbreeding. And I don't inbreed on projects like that where I don't have to. Where I have the opportunity to outcross, I would be at least 2 generations removed before I would try to breed a Nexus to a Nexus. But there's no motivation for me to do that. Because typically, most of the time in boa constrictors, supers aren't great animals. So why would I bother? Plus, if I have 2 Nexuses, I could breed them to other VPI animals, if it's a VPI Nexus, and I have a shot at 2 litters. If I'm breeding a Nexus to a Nexus, I have a shot at 1 litter. So I cut the likelihood of my success in half by trying to breed them together. And for what? For the opportunity to maybe make 25% litter of supers that really have about an 80 or 90% chance of not being healthy, robust animals. So I wouldn't do that breeding. So you always need, if you're going to do this smart, you always need more males than females. So you should acquire the quality female first, then the male. So you always have at least 2 years, if you're not power feeding everything, you always have at least 2 years to be raising a female before you need to get a male to breed to that female eventually, because he can breed at 18 months or at 2.5 years when she is 4.5 or 5.5 years old, which is the best way to do it. There's my first I try not to say So you obtain the female that you want for a project, and you obtain, if you can, you obtain 2 males for that project. Now, you still only have a shot at 1 female. So if you're a collector, and you don't want to be a breeder, you just want to collect, then you just collect one of this, one of that, or a pair of this, pair of that. But at the end of the breeding season, if you've got, say you have 8 pair of 8 distinct different projects, at the end of the breeding season, if you're only trying to breed those 8 pair together, you're not going to get 2 out of 3, most likely. You won't get 2 out of 3. It'll be even less than that because you didn't have enough males. You're going to drop it down to the male rate, which is 45 or 50, because you don't have extra males to reach the potential that you would have if you had enough males to cover all those females. And if you're just breeding 1-to-1, you lose the opportunity of breeding that female if the male you've got for her is unwilling to breed or he's ineffective. So it's always wise to have extra males. Now, you can't always afford it. It depends on what it is, depends on what the project is. But you should always, if you can, have more than 1 male for a particular project to breed to a female. You're just wise to do that. Males, if you don't pump them a lot, or you keep them small, they take up a lot less room. You can keep them in a drawer where you need a cage for a female, typically. You have a large tub. For a female, you don't need as large a tub for the males, right? So you always need extra males. So if I was getting into boas and my favorite thing was anthristics, say, and I liked Sharp second most, and I like VPI third most, for instance, I wouldn't get 1 pair of each. I would probably get, this is assuming everything is the same price, which it's not, but I would probably get 3 pair of anthristics. That way I'm much more likely to produce anthristics than if I get 1 pair of each. Do you follow me? So it's all a numbers game. It's all statistics. You need more in one particular project in order to be successful with that project. So if you can afford it, you should get a couple of females from one particular project. Especially if there's something brand new that's up and coming and you would like to capitalize on it and you would like to get in on the ground floor and try to make some of those yourself, and you get 1 pair, and I've seen many people do this, like with labyrinth boas, get 1 pair of labyrinth boas from me, or get 1 labyrinth boa from me, and try year to year to year, and it doesn't happen. You don't make them. And by the time you make them, the price is 25% of what you bought that first one for 8 years before. Well, if you would have bought 2 early on, you would have been much more likely to have bred it. I mean, some of it, this just seems really, really obvious, but people don't think about it enough, I think, a lot of times when they're acquiring or developing, putting together their collection. Follow me? Another thing that you should consider is a lot of people only buy kind of the key animals for particular projects. And they don't buy what I would call foundational project animals. So this in a way is a little bit contradictory, but it's a complementary strategy that can work out for you. So there are many projects where it would be wise to have some what I would call foundational animals. So one example of a foundational animal, even if it's not your pet project, would be a really nice anarthristic or a really nice ghost, or an anarthristic or ghost combo that had some other genetics to it. Even if you don't have a specific plan on something you want to breed with it, in 3 years or 4 years, when she gets big enough to breed, oftentimes you'll wish you had that animal that you had raised from baby, because you have that animal you could use for backup. Especially if one of your key males gets the job done with a more important female. Well, now you can make whatever that male is hets for whatever he is, assuming he is a simple recessive and visual, plus whatever incomplete dominant traits he has, and that are het for anarthristic. You follow me? So some foundational animals are wise to have in your back pocket, so that those key animals, when they've done their job, there is the potential you might be able to squeak out an extra litter out of him. And in that case, that's not a waste to make that a breeding happen, especially if he has accomplished the more important one to begin with. You follow me? So an anarthristic or a ghost or a combo, and they're relatively cheap now, right? A call blood animal, same thing. Call Sunglow, lipstick, call Key West, call Motley, call Key West Motley, any number of combos in call. Sharp, well, I don't work with Sharp. Well, Sharp may be a great animal as a backup animal once you've accomplished what you wanted to with that other animal, that other male. If he's got the job done, now you've got that female for him to breed her as well. So foundational animals for backup are a really good idea, and something that I definitely practice myself. So a lot of times I'll obtain an animal that I don't have any idea how or when I'm going to use it. So I'll give you a perfect example. So it was about 8 years ago. I had some VPI Key West and VPI Key West jungles at Tinley for sale. I had about 4 of them, a really nice litter, and they're quite expensive at the time. And I had them for sale, and I had somebody come by and offer me. They actually made the offer on behalf of someone else who wasn't at the show, but was corresponding with him on the phone. So he was there working a deal, and they were going to buy it from him if he could work out a trade with me for something that he thought I might need. So I traded for 3 hypos het blood. I didn't own a blood of any kind, so I traded for 3 hypos het blood. 2 of them were jungle, females, babies, for 1 VPI Key West. No, I don't even remember if it was a jungle or not, but I obtained these 3 females and kept them. And then later on, the gears started moving, and I started thinking, well, what would be a good animal to get to breed to these? What can I make? Blah, blah, blah. What would be a good project animal to breed these with? And eventually I came to the conclusion that, it would be a really good idea to have these animals if I had some Labyrinth's het blood. Hmm. So they were too young to breed them to a labyrinth, but I sought out and obtained a blood, a sharp blood male, which I used, bred him to a labyrinth, and then I kept back some of those babies, sold some of those babies, and I raised them up and eventually bred one of those to one of those hypo het bloods. And that's where I made my first blood labyrinths. Came from that breeding. So I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't got those foundational animals, those hypos het blood. The hypo bloods at that time would have been quite a bit more expensive and pretty rare, or especially a jungle version like 8 years ago. And so I was able to obtain the hets, well, it was just on a trade, and then picked up the male sharp blood to make the hets, the labyrinths het sharpened blood, to breed to that and make them. And at the same time, I had also picked up some other animals, some other boas that were paradise het blood. I got a sharp sunglow het blood. So I'm thinking about all the different things I can do with those labbies double het sharp blood, and some just plain het or double het sharp bloods. And last year, I made the first, this year actually, I made the first sharp blood labbies and sharp blood labby hypos, or sharp sunglow blood labbies with those other animals. So those, again, those were additional foundational animals. So it's something I didn't have a very specific project for when I obtained them, but I made the labyrinths double het sharp blood that I could breed to them. So you got to be kind of thinking ahead, thinking forward about things that you can do with your animals, projects that you can make and put together. So those are just a few things, a few thoughts that come to mind that I thought I would bloviate about today. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and enjoyed my little backdrop. Got some big Peruvians down here. These are possible het bacanos. Unproven yet. These ones, yeah, I have other ones that are proven, but these in particular are unproven. And we'll see if we can make some of those. So, here we go. Ready? At any rate, that's it. Hey, have a good one.